Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you have ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. I am your host, Patty Porter. My guest hosts, Dina Zameta and Stephen Kotev, along with our guest experts, will share our experiences, raise your awareness, and give you food for thought. We will share with you problem-solving strategies no matter what your situation is. At work, with neighbors or friends, family, and as partners. Tune in or join in the conversation every Tuesday evening.
Brāv is a new way for people of any age to find a solution to bullying, violence, and conflict. Listen in today to find out how to settle family, school, and workplace disputes online. Hello, I'm your guest host, Stephen Kotev, and joining us today for our program entitled Become a Virtual Judge or Have Your Case Settled on the Net, Part 1, is Remi Alli of Brāv. Remi Alli is a graduate of the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, where she earned a bachelor's in psychology in addition to her law degree. Remi also holds a master's degree in health and law policy from Loyola University Chicago School of Law. She has mediated for over 15 years, resolving thousands of cases, and is trained and certified mediator through the Supreme Court of Ohio. She has written for Forbes, Neuroscience for Kids, among others, and received the top prize in the nation for her legal writing through the American Judges Association. She's also served as a teacher of law through the Law and Leadership Institute. Welcome to the program, Remi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Stephen.
Well, we're glad to have you, and I think the thing I want to start with is if you look at the name of your company, it's pronounced Brāv, not Brāv. There's no E on it. There's the little mark on the top. It seems like that was a conscious decision to have your company be named Brāv. Is that right?
Sure, definitely.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So we wanted to have an interesting name that people could identify with. And what we're seeing is that a lot of people believe that conflicts occur due to aggression, and aggression is good because that's a signal of strength. But we're trying to explain that there's strength actually in vulnerability. Actually, 95% of conflicts stem and thrive due to a lack of clarity. And so when people understand that communication is key to ending conflicts, they start to understand that there's strength in that way as well, and that Brāv is actually being able to communicate effectively with others, thus resolving or reducing conflicts. Well,
and that's something that I think is really important, and I want to make sure we understand. And so by talking about or encouraging folks to be brave or use Brāv, it's different than just being aggressive. It seems like it's very much about being intentional and being clear. Is that right?
You've got it. What we're seeing right now today is that we're holding a lot of our emotions inside. We're not communicating effectively with people who may have hurt us. And oftentimes what we're just also seeing is that people are just miscommunicating. We're not often intending to hurt others, but we may perceive it that way. So what we're seeing today is we're holding in our emotions, and that's causing a lot of health problems, not only mental but physical problems, such as strokes, heart issues, gastrointestinal issues as well. But the mental health issues are there as well. And so what we're seeing is we're internalizing our issues, and that's leading to the suicides that we see, or we're externalizing it, and that's when we're seeing the bullying, the murders, etc. So we want people to associate being willing to resolve conflicts with being brave.
Well, I think that's a really great message. You know, your logo is a lion, and let's talk a bit more about what exactly is Brāv.
Sure. So the fastest growing areas of technology are those that allow people to contact each other, and what we're understanding about that is since we are communicating differently now, we've got phones, we've got Skype, just technology in general, we're seeing that a lot of people are losing their interpersonal communication skill set. Brāv wants to be able to allow people to effectively learn to communicate all over again. So Brāv is essentially an online dispute resolution. We train anyone in conflict resolution, and those in turn resolve the conflicts of others directly on our site, face-to-face. So there's a Skype-like platform where you're able to look at one another effectively and still able to assess each other's emotions when you're with those that you're in a dispute or conflict with. And if if that's intimidating, you don't have to. You can use the instant messaging portion or have a phone call with another. But what's best about it is that we train people to become a neutral third party to help you effectively manage your conflicts online or elsewhere.
Well, and it's really interesting because I want to see if I'm following this, because it sounds like it's a platform is one part of it, and so kind of taking a look at the changes in technology, a lot of folks use social media type technology on a regular basis, and it seems like Brāv has built in with it ways that folks can use this new technology to talk about their problems or deal with their problems. Is that right?
You got it. Basically, we want people to use technology not only in the way that it's traditionally used, which is to speed up communication, but we want people to use technology in order to slow down, think effectively, communicate, and help resolve disputes that they're having daily. Essentially, what we've been noticing is that we're in a very fast-paced society, particularly in the Western countries, and we are not able to slow down and kind of just naturally assess what's going on, and we're internalizing it or externalizing that. We want people to kind of find ways to increase their interpersonal skill set and find ways to help manage the conflicts that they're going through every day. And that includes family issues that, you might have with your spouse or sibling, spat, or even a coworker at work, or even peers at school or university level, or even just community issues. Maybe you're having trouble with your neighbors. If you can get on Brāv with like a neutral third party to help you manage a conflict, that would be amazing.
Well, and this is what I think is really interesting is, so say you got a problem, one way of, you say you're somebody who is either pretty comfortable with technology or wants to use technology to kind of make the conversation go along easier. It's because it sounded like one of the things that folks could do is if they wanted to talk face to face with the maybe the assistance of somebody else, they could do that through Skype, or if that was a Skype type of thing, interface. If that was too much, they could use chat. So it was somebody who's like, hey, I'm familiar with that kind of stuff. That would be something they could completely do through Brāv, right?
You've got it. Another option is also, if you don't necessarily feel comfortable looking at the person face-to-face, we have the digital cartoon mask that either one or two, both of you or more, whoever parties are in dispute, may wear. So you're actually still seeing the emotions that are conveyed with the parties that you're in dispute with, but you're actually wearing a mask.
Huh. So that's really interesting because, what we know about communication is that a lot of times when you're talking about things that really matter to folks, it's your nonverbal communication that actually says the most. So that way, even if you don't want to show your face, you could at least show your feelings, and that would allow them to participate, but also sort of feel safe, right?
You got it. And also what we've found out in our research is that a lot of people are losing the ability to communicate and understand nonverbal communication. So this is also helping to increase that skill set as well.
And I think that's really interesting because it seems like you've started really thinking a lot about how to use technology to help people communicate because of the fact that they're using technology, so the classic example is people who text and don't talk, but also things that they could take advantage of. So, why don't you sort of flush it out a little bit? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about exactly how it works? Because I think we're starting to get a little bit of an idea, but I don't know if you want to give us an example or talk to us a little bit more about how exactly it works, because I want to hear how you came up with the concept, but I still think we don't fully understand exactly how it works. So I don't know if you can give us a little bit more of an information or an example.
No problem. Sure. So let's say you're at work and you and a coworker are on a team project together, and you may not necessarily have agreed with how a project should be run, but you guys have always fairly treat each other pretty well. But you found out later that your coworker may have been speaking about you behind your back. And you didn't say anything for several weeks, but you noticed that the environment's becoming more and more hostile between you and the coworker, and it's leading to more of a passive-aggressive relationship. So ultimately, frustrating the project and the project goals. You don't want to necessarily go to your boss or the HR yet, because that seems a little bit just preemptive and also possibly immature and may cost you, your job or relationships at work. But you don't know necessarily the best way to resolve it. In lieu of going to the HR or your boss, you can go online with Brāv and your coworker and meet with a neutral third party who can help flesh out what can be done to not only get your project resolved efficiently and effectively, but also to ultimately become better coworkers for each other, and that stems from communicating effectively. So basically, after successful training online, a Brāv one is entered into our database and notified when parties in dispute need their help in managing a conflict. And during a Brāv session, there's pop-up messages that guide the neutral third party. These are the Brāv ones, to help listen and manage the conflicts of the two or more parties in dispute. In our example, those are the two coworkers who are becoming a little bit passive-aggressive during their project. If the parties wish not to see one another, as I stated prior, they can use a digital cartoon mask that mirrors their emotions, or they can even meet separately during the session, and the neutral Brāv one will be able to help communicate whatever each of the parties may have or not to communicate. And then ultimately what happens is agreement is reached, basically outlining what is wanting to be stated and the best way for all parties that can effectively communicate together, and they essentially will adhere to the agreement.
Well, and so this is really, really interesting, because what I like to do is sort of follow up with two questions, and I'm just figuring out how to put it all together. I think what I want to say to folks is first of all, everyone here who's listening, you're listening to the Texas Conflict Coach Blog Talk radio program with your guest host, myself, Stephen Kotev, as part of our series on workplace bullying and toxic and hostile working environments. I'm joined by Remi Alli of Brāv as part one of our conversation on becoming a virtual judge or having your case settled on the net. And my two-part question is this, and I wanted to get that out of the way to let you really speak, is, what do you see yourself doing differently with Brāv that hasn't either been done by somebody else or, you're really doing in an innovative way, and how did you come up with this concept?
Yeah. So what we're doing differently is the two-part component. We're not only helping to manage conflicts that others might have, but we train anyone in conflict management skill sets. So it is both a preventative tool and a way to manage already occurred disputes. And we see the use as we stated before, schools, universities, families, communities in general, but also particularly the workforces. And what we're seeing is a lot of interest from HR departments that are reaching out to us because they like the idea that a lot of the conflicts that they're seeing can be easily diverted to Brāv in lieu of going to them and causing and escalating conflicts that are already occurred. Why not diffuse them by going online and not having to bring it in or escalate it to your boss or the HR department?
So in that, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So essentially it becomes the first option to settling a dispute before going to an authority figure at your place of work or whatever other environment you might find yourself in a conflict.
So that gets to be then this thing of, you got a problem, you need help, you're not sure if you want to work with your boss or not. Well, okay, you can go to Brāv. And I think it's also really clever, the people who are going to help you, they're called brave ones. And that to me I thought was a very clever and seems like a very intentional term, is that the person you're asking you to help is a brave one. Can you talk a little bit more, just sort of finish off to see if I got it right, that, hey, I don't want to go to my boss, I can go to Brāv, but specifically I'm going to ask a brave one to help me. From there, talk a little bit more about the whole concept of the idea behind being a brave one.
Yeah. So Brāv one, as we stated before, is like the neutral third party. They remain unbiased. You don't need neither or any of the parties, because there might be more than two people in dispute. Maybe there's 3 or 4 or even a whole group who are in dispute, to have never met the Brāv one. So the Brāv one comes in with a completely clear, fresh understanding of the conflict, but without knowing any of the parties involved. And so these people are generally those who are interested in helping to manage conflicts of others, who are interested in areas of psychology or social work or law, any type of interest in helping to basically understand different points of view and help to manage conflicts efficiently. So also what we're seeing are people who are interested in judge relationships, or even the television shows like Judge Judy or Judge Mathis. Those people are often interested in becoming brave ones. So they're not necessarily being an actual judge, but they're helping to resolve conflicts by listening to different perspectives and helping to essentially come up with an agreement that all parties can live with. And generally they're just guiding those in dispute to come up with their own agreement. So it's very self-sufficient in that sense. We came up with this idea because, first of all, I've been mediating, as Stephen had stated, since around the age of 15. And one of the things I first learned in my mediation training course is that essentially anyone can become a mediator, which is settling conflicts between 2 or more people. You don't even necessarily have to go through training, as long as you remain neutral, unbiased, and you're willing to listen to all parties in dispute and help them to resolve their dispute effectively. But training is often encouraged because oftentimes we see that it's hard for people to remain neutral, or just to get better sense as to how to effectively help others to manage a conflict. So what we notice is that there's a lot of interest in becoming a brave one, and that's not necessarily just to help resolve conflicts with others, but for those to improve their own interpersonal skill sets with others. So even if you may not want to help and become a brave one during a session, you can just help increase your own skill set. During my undergraduate career, I spent a semester in D.C. when I was a senior at Michigan, and that taught me how rampant an issue abuse, violence, suicide really was. We were seeing different stories daily, nationally and internationally, about all different types of issues beyond my imagination. And everyone discussed how big of an issue these conflicts were, but no one really had devised a practical solution to help either end it or at least manage them. And that's where Brāv as a concept began about 10 years ago. So I began researching it since 2006 as a feasible alternative, and how ordinary people could empower themselves in conflict management skills while helping others settle various types of disputes.
And that's what I think is very wonderful about what you've been doing and what you want to do is, I think it's going back to that same message that you got when you were 15, because it's funny in the similarities in our background, because I was around that same age when I was learning about it in high school, and the idea that you were trying to help these folks figure it out themselves, and you weren't putting yourself in there and saying this is what you're supposed to do. You're trying to help them figure it out themselves, and it feels like you're trying to use Brāv as another way of sort of like the next generation or the next version of that idea, so that technology and a lot of the social media type tools are now being used to help them accomplish that same goal. Is that right?
You got it. And it's interesting because oftentimes people do mention, I've always wanted to place myself in a judicial role, or I'd like to learn more about becoming a judge. And sure, I mean, there's a lot of parallels with being a judge when you are mediating, but mediation to me is even more evolved in that we're helping people empower themselves by coming up with their own solution, their own practical solution, unique solution that will serve best for them in their unique circumstance. So we might not necessarily know the exact dynamics of a workplace environment, but we can help them in terms of listening to all sides of a dispute and seeing what would be the best way that all parties in a dispute can effectively manage themselves without escalating the conflict anymore in their particular workplace environment.
Well, yeah, because as opposed to somebody else making the decision for them, you're going to help them make the decision for themselves.
Exactly.
Right?
And actually they're making the decision for themselves. But, yeah, we just help kind of guide them along, and we're that third-party neutral that's listening without making any judgment, but seeing if there's a way that all parties in dispute can communicate and find the best way to kind of help lessen that hostility at work or wherever else they might find themselves in conflict.
Well, this is part one of our program, and you're going to be joining us again, thankfully, next week to continue this program or to continue this conversation. I don't want to ruin our next program and move too quickly. What I'm wondering is I always, in each program, try to find something practical that I can ask our guests to share with our listeners about either your expertise or about how Brāv works. And so I don't want you to give away all your secrets, because we've still got one more program together. But in that same sense, what practical advice can you give our listeners about either dealing with conflict or using Brāv, or using technology to resolve conflict, whatever you think is the right answer? But what practical advice do you have for our listeners?
Well, we had stated earlier the statistic that 95% of conflicts stem from lack of clarity. Having that in the back of your mind when dealing with another that you often are in conflict with is key to any sort of effective way of resolving a conflict. Kind of place yourself in the other person's shoes, and don't always assume that something that someone says that might seem offensive is intentional. I mean, even if it is, it's better to find a way to slow down, think about it, and just pause prior to answering, because the one thing that we don't want to do is let our emotions rule us. Remember that essentially there's strength in vulnerability, and it's not necessarily strength in being aggressive or hurting others. So I think that's one of the things that we'd like to kind of get effectively across.
Well, and that takes us full circle, because I think if I understand you, here is what you were saying in the beginning is people think they're brave because they're aggressive. But I think what you're saying is that the people who are really brave are the ones who are willing to talk about their problems, and they may look vulnerable, but they're actually the ones who are strong.
Oh, without a doubt. Often what we're seeing is once someone's been indicted, for example, for a crime against another, a crime against humanity, and they find themselves in front of the actual judge in court, they have to essentially become vulnerable at that time as it is. They're generally stating that, I'm really sorry for the crime that I committed against you or your family member. I often regret, not always, but most of the time we're seeing that people are regretting it as it is. So why not take that time and and use that vulnerability prior to acting?
I've got some follow-up questions that I want to ask you, but I think I'm going to save them for the next show. I think on our next program for our listeners, we'll talk about how folks actually utilize it and what kind of problems. Our theme for this month is about bullying, toxic and hostile working environments, and I thought maybe in our next program, Remi, we could talk about, how Brave could help somebody who has those type of problems. What I'd like to do now is what assignment could you give to our listeners about digging deeper into what we discussed today? It's sort of like if you were to give them homework, or if they wanted to sort of understand what we've been talking about today better, do you have any recommendations for our listeners to do that?
You got it. Yes. We actually would love for you to contact us at info@brav.org and sign up and get a brochure and also our short packet, basically with really interesting and fun and modern ways to help resolve and manage your conflicts. So definitely we would love to hear from you. Contact us either way, and also pick up our packets or brochures. And we would love for you to like us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/Brave, BRAV, MOVE, MOVE. And also just essentially start researching. We would love to hear if you can call in for the next session for any questions you might have, too, after looking over a brochure and packet. But there's definitely some fun-filled information, and we'd love to hear your feedback on it. And also, we would love for you to find ways to bring Brave to your workplace or other environments that you might see this being an effective way to help resolve a conflict that you're seeing. We want this to be a hands-on community feel that you guys are empowering yourselves with as well. So definitely we'd love to hear from you and hope to bring Brave to environments of your choice.
Well, because my next question was one that you had sort of already answered, and that is how can folks reach you? So website is brav.org, is that right, or is it .com?
.org.
Yeah, brav.org, that's what I thought. And then if they go on, go ahead, what are you going to say?
Oh, no, I was just laughing. Hopefully we'll be able to get the .com soon, but right now we're just at .org.
.org. And then from there, it's on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, it's BRAVMOVE, Brave Move. Yeah. Is that right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So those are the two there. And then why don't you tell them one more time what the email address is to contact?
Oh, sure. info@brav.org.
Okay, very simple, very straightforward. So, Remi, thank you so much for joining us for Part 1. Folks, please listen in for next week on Part 2, as we're going to talk a bit more about, we're getting into some specifics of what kind of problems can Brave help you with, and if someone wants to utilize it, how it's going to work, in addition to some other questions. And I want to now offer to you, Remi, any closing comments or any closing thoughts for Part 1 of our program.
Well, I would also love for you guys to think of different questions you might have about conflicts that might be arising that you either are privy to or you're observing, and ways that you think that you could effectively manage them in order for them not to escalate any longer or internalize or externalize. So if you guys have any thoughts on that, we'd love to hear from you. Please email us, again, info@brave.org, or leave a comment on our Facebook. Thank you so much.
Well, and thank you for being on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you enjoyed the program. You can find all of our podcasts archived to listen at your convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. You can also become a Facebook fan of Conflict Connection or Twitter me at TX Conflict Coach.